Good afternoon, everybody. It's Tuesday, so it's time for Q&A with our family support team at the St. Louis Arc. We're going to start off today. I want to introduce you to our two guests, Jill Ruffett and Kelly Griffin, who are here from Map Habit. And I think it's always fun to start out and meet people and hear about why they do the jobs they do. So I'm going to have Jill tell us what Map Habit is in just a couple of sentences and why she is spending so many hours of her week hanging out with Map Habit.
Hi, thank you so much. We appreciate you so much for featuring us and sharing us with your constituents. Map Habit is an application, and it is an application that works for independence and visual mapping. I'll explain that more in a little bit, but just kind of keep that piece of it. I joined Map Habit as a parent of two kiddos with disabilities. My oldest daughter has Down syndrome and autism, and my youngest daughter has Down syndrome. And so we joined through a study with LuMind, which is an organization that focuses on Alzheimer's and individuals with Down syndrome. And we, in the study, they asked for feedback. I gave it. I'm kind of mouthy. And they said, hey, will you come work for us? It's a great organization that is working on making sure we have the resources for individuals like my girls. And I love that they wanted that input. And when you give them input, they make the changes. So that's a huge telling piece for why it's important for my life and why I'm here.
Wonderful. Thanks. I can't wait to hear a little bit more about it. But let's meet Kelly. Kelly, you're not a stranger to the St. Louis Arc. Tell us a little bit about you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly Griffin. I actually started out working for the St. Louis regional office 16 years ago. So I have a long history of working with individuals with IDD and their families. And I recently got brought on to a Map Habit. I was introduced to Map Habit. I thought it was just a really cool application, just from meeting families over the years and having a family members myself to have developmental disabilities, seeing how that this app could really assist with independent learning skills and independence. So that's why I came aboard, and I'm excited to be here and talk more about the app.
Great. Well, let's get on to it then. So I think while Jill is getting her screen ready to share, I just want to remind you all that as part of the work we do together when you're planning and problem solving for people, you want to use all your tools for problem solving. And sometimes technology is underutilized. There's so many ways that you can use tech to help people be more independent and help people have more information when they need it. So here's one way we can do that. I'm going to have Jill give you a short overview of what Map Habit is.
So just a quick overview. So to start in, like, what is it, right? So we talk about Map Habit and what is it? It's an application. It's an application that can be used on a tablet. It can be used on a phone. It can be used paper-based. And so it's really has multiple formats that you can utilize it. So just talking about the ways that we utilize it in our life. So we use it for supported independence for living, with activities of daily living. We also use it in my daughter's learning environments, and we use it in that preparation for transition and employment opportunities. So looking at ways, think about it as building skills, using everything we know about visual supports, but in an automated format where we can include video and we can include audio. We know best practice for so many individuals with intellectual disabilities is to utilize those visuals, but how do we put it in their pocket? How do we put it in their hand? How do we help them be successful by supporting them and not doing? And so that's really the focus of Map Habit, is to look at that piece of it. So this is just looking at the activities of daily living that we view as areas, all areas that maps can be built to be utilized to support the individual. So as much as possible, we want to support each individual self-advocate in building their own maps and building those maps with their team. So if you look at just a broad, I like to say it's your whole life. So where are the places you're focusing on outcomes? What are the things you're trying to build? Where are the areas you're trying to grow? Where are the places you need a little bit of extra help? And how do we build that piece out in these areas? So the part for me that is really, really powerful is this right here. So each self-advocate has their own subscription to the application. And then each person in their circle of support automatically could be added without adding on additional cost. So each person, so when we look at it from home to school to therapist to case manager, et cetera, each of those individuals can be on, see the same maps, create maps, schedule maps, and support the individual through this one platform. And so that's the powerful, powerful piece to me, because how many times do we play the telephone game with the professionals in our lives where we're trying to make sure we're all doing things in the same way? Because the thing we also know, in addition to visual supports, we need consistency of care. And we need to know that when we're learning a skill and we're building those areas, that it's the same by each person. My mom is very, very involved in my daughter's lives, and we love that. But sometimes grandma and I don't agree on the way we're teaching a skill. And so when Map Habit is the thing teaching the skill and not me, grandma follows it. When Map Habit is the thing teaching the skill and not me, my 13-year-old with Down syndrome and autism follows it. She may not follow me, but she will follow the map. And so those are ways that we utilize it in a lot of ways that I had no idea would be helpful in adolescence, not just in our intellectual disability world.
I'd like you to go back to the first slide because there were some great photos on there. And I think the first thing I want to ask is, what is a map? Because when I first heard about this, I immediately thought of a Google map with places people were going to go. And I thought, no, I've got what I want for that already. But you guys use the word map in a different way.
Yes. So think about it as a visual schedule. So if you look at this over on the right-hand side where we show, someone putting together a car seat. So, visual schedules have become a part of our world and our lives, specifically in the intellectual disability world. I know when I joined Map Habit, we had a stack of visual schedules or visual habits that we had that had the little icons, had each of the individual icons that laid out skills for our girls. And those stacks of paper were life-changing, but I'll tell you what they weren't. They weren't very mobile. They were amazing skills that had been put into a place that were very usable at home, not anywhere else. And so over the years, we've used multiple systems that we have left little icons on a Velcro backing across the whole world. They're like the Velcros, the breadcrumbs of my family. If you see an icon with a Velcro on the back, we've been there. We've left them behind everywhere. And so, these beautiful systems that we have created, recognizing that visual learning is so important, but not necessarily very functional in the real world. And when I started to really think about my girls being completely independent, if you will, I don't know, completely maybe aggressive, but being more independent, and having that opportunity to have an employment opportunity to go work someplace. Is this stack of paper going to be feasible for them? No, but an application with that same process mapped out. So each of the steps are like a slide, if you will. So if you think about just our PowerPoint we have here in front of us. So each slide contains the data, the directions, and can have the video and audio attached to each individual slide to walk them through each individual step.
Okay, great. And we've got a question, and I was going to ask it anyway, about whether or not you could still print these out. And it looks like you've got multiple options for how you view your maps.
Yes, yes. And so what you do is you actually email the map to yourself as a PDF, and then you can print it or you can share that PDF. So, part of that is if you have folks in that circle of support who are not people you necessarily want on the application itself, but you still want to share a map with them, you can send it to them as a PDF, you can print it out. If there are certain skills, say showering, that you don't necessarily want the iPad or the tablet, and I keep saying iPad because that's our world, but it works on both Android and iOS. But if you don't want that running, in the shower, say, or outside of the shower, it's something you could print out and, put up in laminated option in the shower, however that works out best for you.
That makes me think of another question, which is, I may not want my job coach to know my showering routine. Are you able to pick and choose who sees what when you invite them to the app?
So it's how it's set up is how you set their access. So you would set individuals when we put them into your circle of support, we set up what access they have, and then you can designate what category maps fall into, if you will, so that yes, you can separate that out. We have a toileting routine that for us, for my oldest daughter, requires a lot of exposure, I guess you would say. And so for her to be able to visualize the things she needs to do, it has to have a lot of practical detail in it that we don't necessarily want her, some folks in her circle to have access to. So yes.
going to keep fielding the questions we've got from our audience, because one of the things they are asking is, can you submit ideas for new maps? Which makes me recognize that we need to talk about, how do you make a map? Because you're talking about creating a map that really sounds specific, like it may have pictures of your daughter in it. Do you make your own maps?
So, the application itself comes with templates, and it comes with templates that are based upon, population, based upon age, some of those kind of things. It has examples of activities of daily living, but the real power of the application is the more customization you can do. So while we know some folks will absolutely just use the templates, they're welcome to do that. But what we want to encourage is that you work with us to help you make those as customized as possible. And we can do that a multitude of ways. We can do that where we help teach you how you go through that process. You can work with us, and we have an occupational therapist on our staff who will work with you to go through, like, when you're kind of building a new map and you say, this is where I want to get, and like, how do I walk through those goals and those steps? So we really want to be a part of your team, because we know the more successful you are, the more successful all individuals with intellectual disabilities are. I'm going to get sappy, so someone tell a joke. The more successful we all are together, and the more independence we achieve, the more opportunities. So we are here to support you, whether that's in building maps for you, helping you walk step by step through building maps. But we know the power. And I know for one of my daughters, her peers are a really big deal. So more than herself, there are some skills we do of her where we build in videos and we build in pictures of her, but there are some maps that we build with her peers. And in fact, we now have a couple of peers who I sometimes send a message to and say, hey, can you get these pictures or these videos for me? And then we build a map, because she's very peer motivated.
What a fun way to build a circle of support too, that includes peers, because that's one of the things I preach to you all, is that you've got to look at opportunities to draw people into your life and find ways that you can mutually support each other. Well, kids love making videos and taking pictures, so to be able to draw them in and actually create that relationship, what a cool side effect. I love that.
Yes, I often get notes in the backpack of map ideas from their peers, and so it's really been a fun way to engage them and how they can help support and build our girls for that future. And it's also, for a mama's heart, doesn't get much better.
All right, I'm gonna let you collect yourself and give Kelly a chance to talk for a second. I appreciate how emotional this is for you, because we do think a lot about how independent our kids can be in the future and what that means for them when you're not around anymore, when you're just not in their back pocket anymore. I picture you, Jill, being able to take that Caribbean vacation down the road, because your girls are all going to be here doing their thing with their maps and their friends, and it's going to be great. So we all want that. I don't want to go any further into the conversation, Kelly, without talking about the cost and how people could access this, because we've got questions about, is this only available through an agency, or can individual families buy it? Is it a monthly subscription? What does this cost? Who pays for it? So give me the overview.
Okay, so we are fully contracted with the state of Missouri for the Division of Developmental Disabilities. So we are waiver approved. So if you do have a Medicaid waiver,
you can request that through your case manager as a service. Of course, you have to go through your ISP process and look at what outcome the individual's working in. And we have a great sheet there to show you some of the outcomes that, if you have something, if you're looking for something particular. So it is a monthly subscription fee. We have a initial cost. If it depends on whether or not you need the tablet or not. If you have a tablet already that you can utilize, we don't need to go ahead and request that as well. But we can request a tablet, and then the monthly cost is $50 in the state of Missouri.
Is that with or without the tablet?
The tablet is a different piece, but it's all funded under the assistive technology code. And then Also, the price point is low enough that if you get that autism funding money, typically that's around $1,500 if I remember correctly. The price is low enough that could, if you could request that through autism funding as well.
Excellent. That's the EMAP funding for those of you that love an acronym. Okay, and then one of the questions was about if you add a whole bunch of people to it, the platform, does that cost extra into the subscription?
No, that is there's a one subscription fee, and you can have as many people on in your circle of support as you need.
Okay, that seems like a very reasonable price for somebody that can really take advantage of this. And I know one of my friends with disabilities is going to vocational skills, and she goes to choir, and she goes to school, and there's so many different paths where mom's trying to figure out how to step out of the way. And I can imagine what a great tool this would be for her. In so many ways. So it's really cool to hear about that. So with your monthly subscription, that gives you access to a menu of pre-prepared templates that you can start off with, and some support with an OT to actually help you create your own. Is there also like a support center on the website where people can have FAQs or have access to a tech assistant?
Yes. So with your membership or your subscription, you have access to a place that has a lot of videos that are set up to walk you through different things, different scenarios. But yes, kind of have that FAQ, troubleshooting, reminders, because it's one of those things where if you've like when we built a whole bunch of maps in the beginning, and then it was probably 6 months before we did one again. And so then it was like, how do I do XYZ again? And so it's really very intuitive, but if you're like me, having those reminders at your fingertips is always a nice resource. And then the other piece is our actual support line, support folks for you. So if you're working on it and you're like, oh, I just can't get it from the video or whatever it might be, always happy to jump on with you and help. And so that's the personal touch we bring to the table. We're funded for 4 official trainings. We foresee some will use, far more than that. There will be some who want more than that. There will be some who that's more than they need. So it really is going to be very individual. And that's part of what we want to focus on, is making sure we support each individual the way they need it. If you add folks to your circle as it goes on, what we'll do is we'll have kind of weekly or monthly webinars where folks can jump on and go through a process of let's create a map together or some of those kind of things. But in the beginning, it'll probably be more need-based, holler at us and let us know what you need. And always
this would be a cool kind of a support forum place too, where you could get families together that are using this to share their favorite maps that they've made, or troubleshoot maybe a challenge that they've had. One of the questions in the chat was about whether you could pay privately, and if so, if you could pay month to month. I would think that this would be one of those kind of things that you'd want to commit to, because you don't want to put a lot of effort into making maps that you're not going to have access to down the road. But I assume private pay is an option.
It is. And so there's a private pay option, and we kind of work with the individual, because typically when we do things that aren't on the waiver, we're kind of doing a setup fee a lot of times we're working with an agency or a facility or an organization that has multiple folks. And so it's really kind of it's a little bit of a different process when you're private pay, because we really handhold you because it's a different process than adding to a community. So that definitely is an option. And so again, reach out to us the same way, and we can walk through some of those options. And a lot of times in that scenario, we're kind of asking what they need and want.
The next question we've got in the Q&A is that when I start creating personalized maps, are those available to everybody in the Map Habit community, or are those mine?
Those are yours. And then if you choose to share them with somebody, then we can help you do that. So there's a couple of different ways. If we have you kind of in a community. So I could see us probably as you have more folks from the art community who come together, the St. Louis art community, kind of creating you in your own little bubble where you can share more easily amongst each other, but you still, no one can see your maps without your permission.
Nice. In some ways, this reminds me of the Quillo platform, which some of you have access to, which is the 1 minute learning and motivational videos. Now we're getting to the point where you're going to be able to upload your own videos into that app, and you can choose to share those with the main platform, but you never have to. And I think that's really important. So I'm Jill, I want to just ask some personal questions, and if you don't want to answer them, I guess you'll do whatever you want to do. But I'm just curious as a parent, what has been sort of the biggest success moment for you where you knew, boy, I finally got something that's really making a difference in my daughter's life?
So I went into the study occurred in the middle of the pandemic. So I went in kind of like, well, why not try one more thing? And I went in as a skeptic. I went in as I've got every app man has made. Could it possibly be different? But I do trust Lumine as an organization. And so I thought, well, what the heck? I'll give it a try. So about the first 3 weeks, I did nothing with it. I'll be very honest. And the team really encouraged me. They said, you know what? You get out of it what you put into it. So it's like everything else. If you don't use it, it's not going to do anything for you. So it's like everything else. So they said, pick one thing. They had been encouraging us to do 3 maps to start out with. And I was just floundering of them, just not getting it done, trying to work remotely, all of those things like all the rest of the world while we're trying to do. And so I did my daughter, the onset of puberty, we had a lot of regression. We had a lot of struggles. We had some toileting challenges that really came back from a place where I thought we had passed over, and we were coming back into a place that, I will be honest, I was at a place a little bit down on hope. And I was like, you know what, we're going to do a toileting map. We're going to do a toileting and a potty accident cleanup map. And we did both of those. And 2 o'clock in the morning, when a bag of soiled garments was placed in bed with me in a plastic bag, mind you, that was the moment I became a believer. So anybody who's instead up at 2 o'clock in the morning dealing with the potty accident, I would much rather be woken up by the cleaned up accident. Was it perfect? Absolutely not. But it was progress that reminded me why we advocate and we work and we work and we work, and I'm going to get emotional again, and we work over and over and over again for those successes. And that was the proof in the pudding for me. It was the proof in the pudding that the work pays off. And it was the proof in the pudding that they have that opportunity to be independent and to lead the kind of life we dream for them, and that we all dream for ourselves. And I'm so sorry.
You don't need to ever be sorry. I'm excited that you've seen that kind of response. And I think it really kind of ties back to what you were alluding to earlier, that it's particularly hard when your child is any child of all abilities become teenagers, and biologically they want to take control of their own lives. And there becomes this power struggle between parents and child, and having a system like this where it takes you out of the telling them what to do, kind of a routine, I think is super, super powerful. And beyond that, the reason kids go through that phase is because adults feel great satisfaction from being able to manage their own lives, and you feel better about yourself, you feel more confident, you feel ready to take on new challenges. So I just feel like it's such a great testimony to where your kids are going. So so good on you, Mom. I can see that you're on the right track. Do your kids want to make their own maps?
They do, which is wonderful, but also interesting.
Yeah, what kind of maps did they think were a good idea?
Well, so Mila, my youngest, she is 11, and she really wants to cook everything on her own now. And I will say, it's just like, remember when you went through early intervention and your kid was taught to do all these things that they hadn't been doing before, and all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, why did I teach them to do that? It's kind of that some moments, right? So my 11-year-old is independently making her own breakfast. She is independently not independently, we do dinner a lot of times. When it gets to be bulk, she really wants to bulk. So she likes to make lots of videos about how to make things in her. She takes it out with her to the sandbox. And so we get mini maps on ways to make dinner in the sandbox. And so that's the biggest one we get. Which is always entertaining. But then the thing we go through, what's interesting is, so then she's like, it's a map. We have to do it. So that's part of an interesting place, because we've talked about like, hey, if it's scheduled, that's what we do, right? And so she's turning it back on me now, like, hey, it's scheduled.
I love it.
So
Well,
great.
that'll be the next fun adventure with Map Habit, I suspect.
Yes, that's right.
Well, and it appears to me, just looking at this slide, that there's like people of all abilities could really benefit from creating this in a way that makes sense for them. And I can see some of the folks that I've supported for years in a day program setting where they needed to be a little bit more independent than they currently were, where it would give them that capacity. But then also I support folks in college, and I know I could have used this in college to keep me on track with things that needed to happen routinely. So this is a really cool system.
I was going to say that I know you mentioned some things, some examples, Sharon. I really see this as this could be used in like the job development area, because you really can include like that job developer, their support system, in helping them create steps in their job so that a person could follow through on as they go throughout their work day. I think that that's something that a lot of our individuals that are in that transitional area would really benefit from.
And I'm just going to jump in and butt in that the research shows, in addition to what Jill talked about people being visual learners, which is a good 80% of the population, there is research that shows that watching videos teaches you how to do a task more quickly than pretty much any other format. So just going to toss that in.
Yes, that's great. Well, and we never want to really, talk about something that we don't currently have, but something we do. We have a grant from the National Institute of Health to work on adding, and help me, it's the virtual reality goggles, so that you're immersed. And so we really see that within our job development opportunities in the future. We're able to immerse them into a potential opportunity, so that then they're able to really work on that skill while having someone working alongside them to walk them through those steps. And so utilizing it as a practice area to go through that piece. So some exciting things happening in that growth. So
that is very cool. There's very few people using that. Although I will remind you all that the St. Louis ARC does use virtual reality in our launch program. And we just got a 3-year enabling tech grant that we'll be sharing information with you all about soon. So we're going to also be able to offer you some support, because I know it's really stressful when new technology comes on board. You feel like, oh my gosh, I should be using this, but it's confusing. We're going to make sure that you've got the resources that you need. Okay, darn it, our time is up. 30 minutes always goes so fast when there's so many interesting people to talk to. Really appreciate Jill and Kelly joining us today. And really check out maphabit.com. This is a really affordable way to offer independence and skill building. And it sounds like there's going to be new components that'll continually be added, which is really awesome. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week.
thank you.
Thank you, Jill and Kelly.
Thank you.